Welcome to the American Railroading Podcast, brought to you by the Revolution Rail Group, live from the great state of Texas. Join us as we educate, entertain, and explore the world of American railroading. Here's your host, industry veteran, Don Walsh.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the American Railroading Podcast. I am your host, Don Walsh, President and CEO of the Revolution Rail Group, the anchor sponsor for the American Railroading Podcast. We're a consulting and brokering firm in the railcar industry. So if you're doing any kind of brokering, whether it's buying, selling, leasing, or subleasing of rail cars, or any kind of consulting, whether it's merger and acquisition, process flow analysis, anything at all, we can help you with that. You can reach out to us today at 844-455-3434 or on our website at info@therevolutionrailgroup.com. You can also check out our full suite of services at therevolutionrailgroup.com. Well, spring is finally here, and you can tell because everything around us is green here in Houston, and I'm sure by most of you as well. The pollen is thicker than ever, and everyone's sicker than ever. So keep your Claritin close and your friends closer. With that said, we certainly welcome the warmer temperatures, but not the lawn maintenance. I was not looking forward to getting back to this at all. So those of you in the Midwest and in the North, I'm sure you have a little more time to enjoy the spring than we do, but we're back at it. But I'm glad to have the warm temperatures. Thanks to y'all, we continue to be in the top 10% of all podcasts globally. We've now been downloaded in 68 countries around the world on 45 different platforms. So thank you guys. Apple is number one. Spotify is number two. For all-time downloads, US remains number one. UK is in second place, and Canada is in third. For the last month, US is in first for the month. Canada is in second, and Germany is in third. So welcome, Germany. You've popped into the top three for the first time, I believe. We've got Australia and Spain right behind in fourth. Hello to our new friends in Argentina and in Cyprus. Please continue to download, subscribe, and share and leave your reviews for us. So a 5-star review, if you would, please. That would be wonderful. If you like what we do, it really helps push us further and further out into the interwebs, as they say, for people to learn more about us and find out about us. So please leave us those wonderful 5-star reviews. If you like what you heard on the podcast, you can buy us a cup of coffee. Literally, you can buy us a cup of coffee. You can go to our website at americanrailroading.net. Look in the bottom left-hand corner. You'll see a little yellow coffee cup. You can buy us 1 cup, 3 cups, 5 cups, or however many cups of coffee you would like. And it's like leaving us a tip for doing a good job. So thank you for those of you that have and those of you that will. Don't forget, we have a YouTube channel as well. So for those of you that are listening to us right now and would like to watch us, you can do that on our YouTube channel. You can either go to our website at americanrailroading.net and click on the videos tab, or go to YouTube at American Railroading Podcast. Again, that's YouTube at American Railroading Podcast. Be sure to check out our online store as well. So we have a little online store, hats and gloves and hoodies. And I guess we don't have gloves. Maybe I will. Hats and hoodies, t-shirts, sweatshirts, all kinds of fun stuff, and challenge coins to represent those that served in the armed forces that are railroad employees or railroad industry employees. You can check those out. A portion of the sales of the challenge coins goes to our friends at Boots for Troops here in Magnolia, Texas, that send care packages to troops all around the world, among other things. I get tongue-tied just talking about it. We're continuing to see tremendous increases in audio and video downloads, as well as an increase in YouTube subscribers. So thank you guys. Please continue to share. We'd love to see the growth month over month. And if you like the growth that you're seeing on the podcast and you'd like to promote your company brand with a podcast sponsorship, please don't hesitate to reach out to us today. We have platinum, gold, and silver sponsorships available. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to us today at marketing@americanrailroading.net. Again, that's marketing at americanrailroading.net. And we'd be glad to send you information on the sponsorship packages that are available. So believe it or not, we're wrapping up Q1 of 2026, which is crazy. It's hard to believe that we're already here. And so it's a great time to get an update on the state of our economy. And our guest for today is no one better to give us an update on the state of our economy than my friend, Professor John Doggett. So John is a professor, hold on here, at UT Austin. Get my notes together for you, John. I want to make sure I get everything perfectly right for you. He's a professor of instruction, global management, entrepreneurship, sustainability, and energy. The University of Texas at Austin, McCombs School of Business Management Department in Austin, Texas, appropriately enough. A little bit of background on John. John received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Claremont McKenna College in 1969, his Juris Doctor from Yale Law School in 1972, and his MBA from Harvard Business School in 1981. After graduation, John went to work for McKinsey and Company as a management consultant and worked for McKinsey's Washington, D.C. and Copenhagen, Denmark offices. John also created his own international management consulting firm where he focused on helping developing countries transform their economics to become more market-oriented. John consulted with clients in 25 countries around the world in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. Today, John is an award-winning professor of instruction at the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas in Austin, where he has been teaching since 1989.
God, it makes you sound really old.
Not at all. It makes you sound very seasoned and very experienced. John teaches MBA courses about entrepreneurship, global competition, and sustainability. John has won 14, maybe 15 now since we talked last, maybe 16 since we talked last, but at least 14 student selected outstanding teaching awards, more than any current member at the McCombs facility. John has taught courses on entrepreneurship and venture capital in Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. He has experience collaborating with companies and trade associations in a wide range of industries, including economic development, electric utilities, oil, gas, and coal, manufacturing, retail, transportation, software, and nonprofit, which I'm very familiar with myself. John is also the academic director of the UT Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders, Leadership and Business Institute. John has also been a radio talk show host of The John Doggett Show on KVET AM in Austin, which was nationally simulcast on C-SPAN and has had articles published about his talk show in the New York Times. Very impressive. No pressure on me at all.
That was the last century, bud.
That's hey, it still counts.
Long time ago.
Still counts. John is a speaker at transportation industry conferences like the Southwest Association of Rail Shippers, or SWARS, where we originally met, and I just saw him last week at the time that we're recording this. John lives in Austin, Texas with his wife, Hai Ping. And I'd like to say, welcome back, John, to the American Railroading Podcast.
It's good to be back. It's good to see you. It was good to see you in Houston, and it's good to talk about what's going on. But these are interesting times. It's the nicest word I can use.
And we're going to get into that, so we'll have lots of time to chat.
Yeah.
Again, it was great to see you here in Houston. When we were speaking, you said that this is your last year teaching full time, and you gave me a pretty darn good reason why that is. Why is it that this is your last year of teaching full time?
You know, one of the challenges as you get older is you decide when you're going to start taking some money off the table. So I've spent my whole life, my wife and I have spent our whole lives saving for retirement and thinking about retirement. And I realized that I'm not going to live forever, even though I'd like to. And so when you get to my age, and my age is, I will turn 79 in October, there are three phases left. There are the go-go years, the go-slow years, the no-go years. And I'm still in the go-go years, but my body's having a conversation with me about how long that transition is going to last. So we decided that it was time to spend more time enjoying life. I don't want to retire completely because spending time with my students keeps my brain as sharp as possible. And it's also something I love doing. I think I do a pretty good job of it. So I'm going to teach one semester a year and spend 9 months of the year with my wife just enjoying life. That's why. The other thing is her mother's slightly older than me because my wife's a lot younger than me. And she's seen the health problems her mother's had. She said, I don't want to have to take care of both of you at the same time. So you get off your butt and let's have some fun while you still can do it. So that's the reason.
Sounds like a good idea. And what have been some of your favorite moments from your teaching career?
I have been blessed to have the opportunity to work with some really cool kids who've been raised well by their parents from all over the world. And the way I teach is not lecture. We do cases from Harvard Business School and business schools around the world. So the students have to get into the shoes of the decision maker and debate data and debate facts and debate with each other. And that's an exciting experience because I pushed them before I could cross between business school and law school, which surprised two of my educational backgrounds. But what really makes it special is you never know how you impacted a student during class or during the semester. And so when they come back a few years later, or 5 or even in some cases 30 years later, and tell you how much of an impact you had on their life, it's just a really humbling, but also very meaningful experience. And I've been blessed to have a number of students come back and say, I remember this class 25 years ago. I don't remember. I remember this day and this impact it had on you. And so that's really cool.
It is really cool. And what got you interested in teaching in the first place?
Well, my mother was an elementary school teacher. She was a reading specialist. And I never thought I'd be a teacher, but I became interested because it's a really funny story. I was at Harvard Business School. We had a visiting professor from the University of Michigan. And one of his requirements was that everybody had to meet with him for 20 minutes in his office. So I came to his office when it was my time, and we had the normal chit chat. And then he said, Doggett, you should teach. You're a natural born teacher. I said, teach what? It's not important. You're natural born. I said, how do you know? I said, I've been doing it for a long time. And when I'm teaching in the room with you, it's like I have a colleague helping to teach the class. You should do it. I know you're not going to want to do it right now, but I'm planting the seed. You're a natural born teacher. And, I was honored that he would say that, but I didn't take it very seriously. And then 8 years later, when I was consulting, one of the things we ended up doing was trying to help countries that had tried centralized planning, even market socialism, as an approach to their economy to change. And what we found was very useful was to give examples of other countries, with cases from Harvard Business School that had done stuff, try to make the transition to a more market-based economy. And so I kind of backed into teaching that way for my consulting business. And eventually I moved to Austin, and to my former wife, we had a friend who knew somebody on the faculty, and I asked them if they'd be interested in me teaching one course a semester part-time, and they said, sure. And 11 years later, I finally accepted their offer to do it full-time because I realized it was what I loved doing. And also, this is kind of personal, I had started second company, had a radio talk show, was doing a lot of other things, and also was married, and that marriage didn't last. And so I decided that if I was going to get married again, I needed to change my priorities and make my marriage at least as important as anything else. And teaching gave me the ability to put my marriage in the front, and then teaching second, and everything else third.
Sounds like you made the right decision.
I did. There's no question about that. I'm married to my current wife longer than anybody else. That's a good marriage.
Absolutely. So what do you think you'll miss the most?
That's a great question. And for all of your listeners and viewers, they need to think about it. We all know that at some point, if we're blessed, we'll be able to retire. And we plan for it, hopefully. And if we're lucky, we save enough money that when we retire, we don't have to worry about money. We know that when we retire, we have a lot of freedom, flexibility to do what we want to do. And if we're really, really lucky, we're healthy enough to be able to enjoy retirement. But there are two things that kind of struck me that I never thought would hit me the way they hit me. The decision to retire is based in part on your accepting your mortality. You're saying, my runway is coming to an end. There's going to be a time when I can't do what I used to do. And I need to take some of that money as it were off the table and spend it right now. So that's the first thing, that you coming to grips with your mortality. The second thing is I spent decades saving. And that's my norm. They save, don't spend, save, don't spend. And now it's like, take some at the table and I run the numbers. Like, it's fine. You'll be all right. You've done well, but it's still like, And then the Wall Street Journal every couple of years runs a series on the 6 things that surprise people the most when they retire. And number one always is you don't realize how much of who you are is tied to what you do, even if the job, quote, sucks. And I realized that because I've started enough companies, started off at home and then went to an office. There's this routine you have when you go to an office or when you work with people, whether you're doing your podcast or something else, and they're part of your life and they become more important than you realize. And then suddenly, if you walk away completely, which is why I can't walk away completely, there's nothing there. And for a lot of people, that's jarring because they didn't realize how much what they did for a living was part of who they were and their sense of self. And that goes very little. The other thing is that a lot of people volunteer, and volunteering is very important. I'm glad people volunteer, but here's the problem with it. If you wake up one day and you say, I just don't feel like doing it, they're not paying you. So you call in and say, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well. When my class starts, I got to be there. And I've been teaching since 1979. I think I've missed 5 classes, 6 classes. 4 when I was in the hospital, so I couldn't go there, and 2 when I was rear-ended or T-boned on the way to class. So, and that's it. At one point, relatively early in my career, I flew from East Africa to Austin, 36 hours worth of flying, got off the plane in about 3 hours. So I had that commitment. Now, if I was volunteering, I'm going to lay over in London. I'm not coming. So that's the other thing. It's just, it's something you have to do, which requires a level of sharpness that doesn't come when you do wrong.
Well, it sounds like you've given it a lot of deep thought, and
Yeah.
I know
You're going to be the same. You're going to be the same when you grow up.
That's assuming that I grow up. I'm working on it, John. I'm working on it.
I'm dying.
But hey, I promise I'm going to come visit you. You offered 2 years ago, because it's been 2 years since you were on the podcast with me, to have me come visit for sit in on a class of yours. So I'm going to do that. I commit to doing that this year. Before you,
well, I'll be. The goal is for me to teach every spring.
Yeah.
So can't make it this academic year. Hopefully, I'll still be teaching every spring, but I don't want to give it all the way up. The school doesn't want me to give it up.
Yeah. Well, I'll still make the effort to come out, because I owe you that.
Cool.
So the last time we talked, which was in 2024, which is really hard to believe, it was prior to the presidential election, which is now come and gone. And this is not meant to be a loaded question. It's just an honest question. But was there anything about the election that stood out to you in particular?
Oh. Yeah, I think the incredible competence of the Democrats in managing the transition from Biden to Harris, and the, in hindsight, understandable blowback from them not having a plan. On the D side, on the Republican side, the failure of any credible Republican candidate to get into the primary and contest President Trump. Our democracy works best when we have open primaries, where we have multiple competent candidates debating the issues, tearing into each other, so that the voters get a chance to get a sense of how people will work. And we didn't have that. And so we ended up having, number 40, 45 is going to become number 47 on the Republican side, and somebody who was honestly patently unqualified to do anything as the other choice. And I know a lot of people who did not like the president, but said, I can't stand Kamala Harris. I know a lot of people who didn't like the president, did not like Kamala Harris, who said, I can't vote for Donald Trump. And that's not the best way to have a democracy. What's the least best option? We want to have what's the best option. So I'm looking forward to 28 being a time where there'll be an open primary on both sides. We get the best that both the Democrats and Republicans can go. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when Bill Clinton was running, his mantra was, it's the economy, stupid. And it's always the economy, stupid. And it wasn't reproductive rights or trans rights or anything else. It was the economy. And when you look at the data was very clear. Prices have gone up almost 20% in the past 4 years. And people's earnings in terms of buying power had gone down 1%. And so that's where they live. That was really important to them. The president was the only one who really effectively articulated that this was an issue. Now, it's one thing to articulate, it's another thing to do something about it. And right now, the president's in serious trouble for the midterms because it's the economy, stupid. And the economy is doing okay, but from an affordability standpoint, this is really a difficult time for most Americans.
Yep.
And so it's very interesting to see how the president and his team adjust what's going on in Iran and what they're doing in the United States to try to make the economy more affordable for the midterm elections, or it's just going to be a bloodbath for the Republicans.
Yeah, we're going to get it.
I think it's too late.
Well,
I think it's going to be a bloodbath on the House side. I think the Republicans will hold on to the Senate, because the other thing that has impacted them is that when Kristi Noem was running DHS, the tactics they used with ICE offended a lot of Americans from the right and the left. Most people I know are very supportive of enforcing immigration laws and supporting people who are here illegally. They just didn't like the style, the mask, the breaking, just the military tactics that were used by ICE. They're just not necessary. But that's going to hurt the president a lot. He finally decided to get rid of Nome, but he waited too late, I think. So you add that, and you add now the hiking gas prices. And I was talking to one of the companies I advise, and they're making a big order on products that they have to ship from overseas because they're afraid the cost of transport is going to make those products unaffordable for them in terms of their inability to pass the prices on. So the president's facing a lot of challenges that, are quite frankly of his own making, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and we're going to get into all that in great detail, piece by piece. I'm glad you brought it all up. So I'm going to roll my sleeves up as we start to get into this. But we talked last time about how elections certainly make an impact on the economy, as every president and their, I don't want to say regime, but they have their own ideas, their own agendas, their own ways of doing things. And President Trump is no different, of course. So his plan is, as I understand it, is essentially a combination of tax breaks, tax incentives, tariffs, which everyone's talked about at great length, re-onshoring of manufacturing, and deregulation. So in a perfect world, would that kind of a plan potentially work?
The president has a pretty good sense of what works politically. His challenge is articulating it in a way that people understand what he wants to do. So you can look at the war in Iran. There have been different reasons to justify the war, depending on the day and depending on what's going on the ground. Tariffs have their place. What would have been much more effective, in my opinion, is for the president to say, when we look at country X, this is what they're doing to us and trying to make our imports very difficult to their country. So we're going to place a tariff on them to get them to understand they can't play it that way. And if they continue to hammer us on importing products to their country, we're going to hammer them on exporting products to our country. Instead of across the board, every single country has a tariff, and we're going to raise it or lower it based on what they're doing in their public life. It's a perfect example. It's Bolsonaro was the previous president of Brazil, a friend of the president. He was impeached and then convicted, and the president thought that was not fair, and so he raised tariffs on Brazil by 50% because he didn't like what the Supreme Court of Brazil did. That's not what you do. That's not what you do. And I think the challenge the president's had is to understand that it's not just about him personally, it's about where the country and the world is going, and sometimes he takes stuff personally and then responds in a way that's just not good for the global economy and for the economy of the United States. That's the first thing. You can't run a country the size of the United States, the number one economy in the world, without making sure that the people in your country and the people around the world understand why it's in their interest for you to do what you're doing. And so sometimes they're just announcements that come out of the blue. It's like, where did that come from? And I've been talking to people about the war in Iran. The Islamic regime in Iran is a doomsday cult of evil people who oppress their folks and keep their control based on violence. And they were this far away from coming up with a nuclear bomb. In fact, the International Atomic Energy Agency said they had enough fissile material to make 4 Hiroshima type bombs instantly. And it would take them a week to turn that material into sophisticated nuclear weapons. So, and we've seen what they've done in the Straits of Hormuz and all the attacks they've had on their neighbors. The last thing you want these crazy people to do is to have nuclear weapons. So I support that. But it does not appear on this day that there is a plan to deal with basically a suicidal regime. That basically, my wife and I were talking about this, and her attitude, her insight was, they have nothing to lose but their life. And they don't care about that because they come from a sect that believes that if everybody dies, the Messiah comes and decides who deserves to go to heaven. So the sooner they die, the better. And so they're not afraid to take the whole earth down with them. And we're seeing that with their attacks on the UAE and Saudi Arabia, even trying to attack Turkey. And they're attacking countries that had nothing to do with the war, just to spread the turmoil. That was should have been understood from day one was going to happen. And there should have been a plan to make sure that didn't happen. So one of the things that continues to strike me is that since the first day of the war in Iran, Iranian super tankers have been moving oil to China every day, generating hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue every day, and we have not stopped. And I'm sure we decided that if we stop them, that blocks the Straits of Hormuz, so we shouldn't do that. But they've now blocked the Straits of Hormuz for everybody but their own tankers, and so they're continuing to make, just an ungodly amount of money to then pour that back into fighting us. And it's just, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? And then the mining of the Straits, that should have been the first thing you should have done is take out their naval, take out their mine layers, on day one and day two. So it's unfortunate that it doesn't seem as though the military and the president have thought through who this really was. I mean, it's not Maduro, it's not Cuba. This is a serious, evil regime, but that spent a lot of time, energy, and money embedding itself deeply, deeply, deeply into the social fabric of Iran, which is why we've killed 80, 90 of the top leaders, and they're just continuing to say, next, it's a whack-a-mole. And that's scary. But that was anticipatable if you studied Iran at all. And another thing is that everybody talks about IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They're not the army. The army is ARTES. IRGC at the beginning of the war had about 150,000 members. ARTES, the actual Iranian army, had about 300,000 members. Most of the army's members are kids who are conscripts, they're not religious fanatics, which is why the IRGC was created to report directly to the supreme leader, because the supreme leader was not convinced that the army of normal Iranians would support his craziness. And so there's no more complex of a world that we've been at war with in the past 50 years in Iran, and I don't think there's a good understanding of that when we started the war. Which means, how do you get off? What's the real challenge is, a number of commentators have said, we believe the president started the war because it was a war of opportunity. Israeli said, we can take out their top 40 people in one day. Let's go do this stuff. But now it becomes a war of necessity. But this is Trump's legacy now. And if he doesn't figure out a way to have this war end so everybody, or most people, think that the United States was successful in achieving its goals, it's just going to blemish his legacy for forever. And how he gets out of this in a positive way is not easy, because the Iranians are saying, we're winning. We've killed 80 or 90 leaders. We don't care. We have more than where we come from. We're fire ants. We're winning. And that sounds silly until you look at the impact they're closing the Straits of Hormuz. And they said, if you attack Karga Island, if you attack our infrastructure, we're just going to blow everybody up we can in Europe, every place else. We're just going to go crazy. How do you work your way out of that? I don't know.
Well, and speaking of things coming to an end, we're going to talk about the Fed here for just a moment. The Federal Reserve, as you know, is a bit of a sore spot for the current administration. The president and Chairman Powell don't quite see eye to eye, but Chairman Powell's term is about to expire on May 15th, 2026. Maybe. And I'll get to why I say maybe in just a moment. But President Trump's nominee is Kevin Warsh, a former Federal Reserve governor and economist with background in finance and policy making, and was an economic advisor to the Bush administration. What is your opinion of Kevin Warsh? If you know about him at all, what is your opinion of him as a nominee, and how will they differ between him and Powell?
Well, clearly he's closer to the president than Powell, even though Powell is reappointed by the president. And so the issue is, how much independence will he be able to exhibit once he's chairman of the Federal Reserve? And the reason that's important is that the minute there's a sense that the central bank of the United States has become politicized, that undermines the value of the dollar, undermines the value of buying treasury bonds. And so, and he's a bright enough man to know that. And so he has to say the right thing to become the nominee, and obviously he did. But he's going to have to figure out how to walk a very fine line between being responsive to the president's concerns and being responsive to the job as Federal Reserve chair. Two things, you worry about employment and you worry about inflation. You want to do things that enhance the possibility of our economy to grow jobs, but you want to do that in a way that limits inflation. And we know that when he comes in, even if the war in Iran is over, there's a lot of inflation that has to be sucked out of the economy because of the war. And the president wants him to lower the interest rates, and that's not what you do at the Fed. You have to raise interest rates to suck inflation. So he's going to, in his first few days, weeks, and months, he's going to go head to head with the president on what's possible. Now, the president claims he can fire the chair of the Fed, but pretty afraid he can't. And the president's attempt to indict Powell on, malfeasance on the rebuilding of the Fed headquarters has been thrown out by the court, so that's over. So it's going to be a very interesting time. And if we get into a spitting match again with the new chair of the Fed, that just undermines people's credibility and the legitimacy of the American dollar. And that's really important for us since we have almost $39 trillion of debt. I think here's something that nobody thought. We talked about it 2 years ago. I didn't talk about it this year. As big as our military is, we're spending more money, over $1 trillion a year, just servicing debt. $1 trillion. Okay. Now, to put that in context, the last budget I saw was about $6 trillion. So 1/6 of our budget is just paying interest on the debt. And the interest rates are from pandemic era. So the one thing we know for sure is that the interest is going to go up next day more and more and more. And so this war, we're borrowing money. Everything the government is doing is borrowing money. And so Chairman of the Fed has a very difficult challenge. I don't care how bright he is, not care how loyal the president is. When he looks at the data, he has to say, okay, what's best for this country? And what's my job? I took an oath to do the best for the Federal Reserve Bank with my job. And I think that he and the president are going to have disagreements about what's the appropriate way to do things sooner than later.
And that goes back to one of your favorite statements about ugly baby glasses, right? No matter what, the data is the data.
The data is the data. You might not like it. That doesn't change it. It's the data.
Yeah. And so originally they were saying that we were going to get potentially 2 rate cuts in 2026. Now they're saying there's an over 60% chance that will not happen. What's your opinion on that?
Well, definitely won't get any rate cuts anytime soon. It's more likely we'll have a rate increase to try to clamp down inflation. And I don't know. I don't see how we get a rate cut this year. Because when I talk to my people in the oil and gas space, they say, if there was even zero damage to the infrastructure, there's so much stuff that's backed up because our Straits of Hormuz are filled that it takes a while from a logistics standpoint for things to clear out. Okay. Now we add the damage to the infrastructure. And so the Qatari gas fields that are center of their LNG production, 2 trains were taken up. And my students who have experience in the space say that under normal rebuilding efforts, it would take 2 to 5 years to get them back up and running. I said, what if you just acted like your hair was on fire and you had to do it as fast as possible? And I said, the fastest would be 6 to 9 months, and that's if you're working 24 hours a day. And he said, the problem with that is you're taking natural gas, which is a gas, you're putting it under pressure, and then you're under tremendous pressure, and then you're putting on LNG. And if you make any mistake in the rebuilding of those trains, it could be the whole thing could blow up. And so, although you want it to come back online as quickly as possible, it doesn't make sense to be going 24 hours a day, because that increases the chance that something will be done wrong and the whole thing blows up, and then you're totally screwed. So when this war is over, it's going to take months, possibly years, to get back to where things were in terms of flow of fossil fuel before the war started. And that has a big impact on prices.
We're going to take a moment here, John, just for a second, and recognize our gold sponsor, EnviroServe. EnviroServe is America's premier provider of comprehensive, reliable, effective, and eco-friendly environmental solutions for the rail industry. Their rail services include mobile rail car cleaning, flaring, interior blasting and transloading, removal and replacement of tank car service equipment, and leak testing. Complete has and non-has waste handling, management, remediation, and disposal services, 24/7 emergency spill response, and more. To learn more, please visit their website at www.enviroserve.com. So oddly enough, I was thinking about this the other day. I was at an oil and gas conference years ago, and nearly every speaker, they were all economists, and nearly every one of the speakers was asked what they felt that we needed to boost our economy. And everyone to a person, this shocked me. I'd never heard this before. They said, what we need is a good war. And I found that so interesting. And I don't remember their explanations. Honestly, I was just taken aback by the response. And this wasn't a panel. This was different speakers throughout the day at this oil and gas conference. And they all said the same thing. And you've already been speaking about the military action we're involved with Iran currently. And I guess I'm kind of stuck. Like, how can this, is there a way this is a positive thing? Is there a positive outcome from something like this?
So here's our history. We were in the middle of the Great Depression when World War II started, and the depression was over. Because what happens when you're in a war is that you are doing, as you've seen with Iran, you're blowing things up, and you have to replenish the things that you're using to blow things up. And so there's a big story in the Wall Street Journal. No, I think it's a Washington Post talking about we used over 800 cruise missiles in the first couple of days of the Iran war. Well, right now, the contractor who makes cruise missiles makes 65 a year. And so there's a growing worry. The White House is saying, don't worry, we have all the bombs and cruise missiles we need. Yeah, but they're saying we had maybe as little as 2,000, as much as 4,500. So we've used a lot of our inventory. And if we suddenly something goes crazy in the Pacific with Taiwan, well, people are worried that we're going to run out of munitions. And so what happens? They're having conversations with not only the contractor who makes the Tomahawk cruise missiles, but also other companies that can make it, saying, we need you to, we're going to use the War Powers Act. You need to start building this. We need more than 65 of these missiles every year. So that's what a war does. Now, this won't have as big of an impact as, say, World War II or Vietnam, because this war will be over at the latest by June, and hopefully by April. But it'll still have a ripple effect on, the production of a lot of military weaponry and shells and everything else to get our stockpiles back up. The other thing is, if you think about, we've released probably 200 million gallons from our strategic reserves. We have to fill that back up. That's what war does. And then nobody talks about Ukraine. We're in our 5th year in Ukraine. But for the United States, Putin would have been successful. But, I talked to my Army friends and said most of the stuff the Ukrainians are using were our obsolete material that we were basically warehousing. Well, that's all gone. All of our warehouse yards are empty. And so now we have to fill them up again. And so from a military industrial complex standpoint, it's going to be coming at high speed for the next year and a half, 2 years. And that helps the economy. So that's what they mean.
And oil prices have been at or near $100 per barrel for the last 3 weeks. It'll be 4 weeks by the time this airs, up from about $75 before the Iran war. So, which is due in part to the bottleneck in the Strait of Hormuz, which you mentioned earlier. So some are saying that the oil prices are up due to an increase in what they call risk insurance at the risk of oil companies for what's going on in the Strait. If that's the case, if so, theoretically, wouldn't the prices drop once the Strait opens, theoretically?
There are two things that have to happen. The Straits have to reopen, and they have to reopen in the pre-war terms. Right now, the Iranians are allowing some ships to go through as long as they pay a toll, and that toll is $2 million a ship. $2 million a ship. That's not small change. And the Iranians, their first offer for peace was, we will control the Strait of Hormuz. We will charge tolls. We'll determine who goes in and out, and they'll pay us money. Okay, so that can't happen, because that just, at the minimum, just increases the cost of products going through the Strait of Hormuz. And it's not just natural gas. And oil is also urea, which is a key component of fertilizer. The second thing is that we have to know for sure that there's no possibility that the Iranians can't, have a bad hair day and decide to start attacking ships again, or the Houthis in the Red Sea. And so they're going to have to be eliminated. And that's not going to be easy. But until we know for sure that in terms of risk insurance, until we know for sure that there's no possibility of the Iranian regime, the organized government military attacking tankers and other container ships that are going in that part of the world, the risk insurance premium is going to be pretty high. Because the Iranians have made it very clear they don't care. They'll do whatever they want to do. If you don't like it, stop them, right? And that's why how this war ends is really important. I'll never be president of the United States, but I can say this is really easy because I don't have to deal with the consequences. But my preference would be that we eliminate the ability of the Iranian regime, this Iranian regime, to exist. So we don't have to worry about sleeper cells coming out and firing drones and ballistic missiles at other countries. I'm not convinced that's going to be what we see at the end of the war. My fear is the decision will be made. We've blown up 10,000, 15,000 sites. There's not much of the military or the secret police infrastructure that's left. And so we're just going to declare victory and walk away with the Iranian, the crazy and mullahs still in power. That's my fear. Because what we saw is that we saw what we did back last June, blew up part of their nuclear weapon system, development system. And then in the 9 months after that, they refurbished, they resupplied, they went ape, to try to reinforce their position because they knew something else was going to come. And so we can't totally eliminate them. And that requires somebody's boots to be on the ground. Then we're going to redo the big picture again in at least a year, if not 2 years. And that's not good. Which means the price of oil will stay higher than it was before.
Now, as of the time we're recording this, there is a partial government shutdown taking place. The previous government...
Yeah. And it's really sad. It's like, politicians, do you understand there are people waiting in line 4 and 5 hours at airports because you guys can't just pay the TSA workers? And so the Senate finally passed a bill that would pay TSA workers early this morning, and the House turned it down. Like, what's wrong with you? Well, they didn't want to fund ICE. Who gives a crap? The American people are being abused, have been abused for 40 days. Your job, and you're getting paid. And you want the TSA guys to work for free. And I have very little respect for either political party right now because of the failure to take the American people's interests out of their number one place.
Well, we saw with the last government shutdown, which was more of a full shutdown in Q4 2025, that it really negatively impacted the GDP overall. So do we see that? I know, obviously, we know this is affecting people negatively in all kinds of ways right now. We feel absolutely horrible for everyone not getting paid and the struggles that they're all going through. Do we see this also having a broader effect on the GDP potentially?
Right now, members of Congress have about the lowest favorability rating of any sector of our economy of America. They're down just above narcos and hidden drug use. Okay? And what they've been doing is doing nothing to cause people to say, we got good people in Congress, in the House, and the Senate. So that has an impact on people's comfort that they have people running our government who have their interests at hand. So there are people I know. Okay, so I'll give you a perfect example. I hate illegal immigration, and I've hated it for a long time because, as the former president of Notre Dame said, we have to close the back door of illegal immigration so we can open wider the front door of legal immigration. And I have absolutely brilliant students who come to the United States from overseas, play by the rules, took all the tests, qualified for a visa, paid in 2 years over $100,000 US, who can't get jobs. And they want to stay here and help grow our economy. And they have to go back. And they're going to go back. And they'll go back and help grow their country. But there are so many companies that are started by immigrants that are kind of important. For example, NVIDIA, the most valuable country in the world. Jensen Huang was born and raised in Taiwan. Then he came here as an Oregon State graduate, now U.S. citizen. AMD, run by Lisa Su. She has a PhD in mathematics from MIT. She's actually a distant first cousin of Jensen Huang. She was born in Taiwan, came over here as a U.S. citizen. Jeff Bezos' father is Cuban. Steve Jobs' father was Syrian. The list goes on. In fact, if you take all the companies in the NASDAQ that were founded by first or second generation immigrants, you get rid of 40% of NASDAQ. 40% of NASDAQ. And so these are the people we should be doing everything we can to encourage to come and help grow our economy. And what we're doing is telling them, get out of here. We don't want to. Get out of here. We don't want to. And so that's going to have a big impact on reducing the GDP. Because we're in the age of AI, where everything is changing at a rate unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. We're telling the people who can help us win that transition to go fly kite and go back to their own countries and compete against us. And that's just insane. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even when the war is over in Iraq, it'll probably take at the minimum a half year, if not a year and a half, before everything settles down because of all the stuff that's gone on. That's going to have an impact on our GDP. And then we have tariffs. The president was told by the Supreme Court he couldn't just carte blanche, ignore Congress and do tariffs on every country on the planet. And so then he turned around and used a tool that he could use, gives the ability to issue tariffs for 150 days. Well, I listened to a BBC interview of the head of the World Trade Organization last night. I was walking, and she said, probably going to take the tariff war is probably going to take 0.9% off of global GDP growth this year. When you add that all up, it's just our economy is going to go slower than it needs to go. And the question is, what benefit are we getting from that?
Well, and the last time we talked about world trade partners, and so who are our biggest world trade partners currently, and has that changed since we last spoke in 2024?
Our economy is much more based on local consumption. Us going to Costco or Sam's Club, or I was going to say Sears, but they don't exist anymore, right? To buy stuff. But we still have about 28% of our economy that's tied to trade. In the past, our biggest trading partners have been Canada and Mexico. They still are, but we're making it life very difficult. Here's a perfect example where I just don't understand what's going on. There's a bridge from Detroit to Windsor, Canada. 2-lane bridge, and it's responsible for carrying a ton of traffic. And because it's too small, traffic really backed up. And so the Canadians said, we will build a new bridge. It'll be, I think, 6 lanes. And we'll handle all the immigration and toll issues on our side, and whatever money owed to you, send it to you. And we'll spend $2.5 billion to build the bridge, and you won't have to pay anything. And the president's questioning whether or not that bridge will be open. I don't understand that. I just don't understand it. So these, if you think about it, not only have Mexico and Canada been our biggest trading partners, but they also are our neighbors. And Canada has never been a threat to us. They do some crazy things, but who cares? Nothing dangerous. Mexico, the cartels are a big issue. And quite frankly, if I'd had a choice as president, I would have gone after the cartels to figure out Iran. The cartels are killing Americans at a rate that Iranians have never had what dreams about. And we're not doing anything. But if you think about this hemisphere, one thing that's going to come out of this war is that countries are going to say, okay, we can't depend on the Middle East for oil and gas because Straits of Hormuz are a choke point. But we can depend on the Western Hemisphere, which are the United States, we have Canada, we have Venezuela, and with those 3 countries, you have tremendous upside potential. We will have pretty much the ability to control where the oil and gas and Venezuela goes. And we should have the ability to work with the Canadians to make sure that their oil and gas goes where it's in the best interest of all of us in the hemisphere. But you don't do that by kicking everybody in the teeth, especially given this Alberta province, which is the heart of their tar sands, is pushing for a referendum to separate from Canada because they're saying 20 to 26 billion Canadian dollars to Ottawa, and they're getting that in return, and so they want to leave. Well, guess what? If they leave, so this is for your railroad friends, all the railroads are going east-west. There's nothing going north-south. So there's a tremendous opportunity to integrate Alberta and their tar sands production into our economy. But how do you do that if you're constantly abusing the Canadians? I don't understand.
You often speak about America's birth rate and the world's birth rate at your different conferences you speak at and such. So where are we today, and why should this matter to people?
There's a term called zero population growth, which is the number of babies that need to be born per fertile woman to keep the population at break even, and that's 2.1 babies per fertile woman. We're now below that, which means that but for immigration, the number of Americans has shrank. And there are a number of countries, South Korea is probably the worst example, where it's like 0.8. Japan, where it's 1.2. China, when it's where I think 1.9. Where I'll give you a perfect example. Last year, China had about 1.4 billion people. Because their birth rate is going down and there are more older people dying than their young kids being born, by 2021, by the end of this century, it's estimated that China will only have 700 million people, down from 1.4 billion. So the reason this is important is obviously because economists, from the first day they thought of the concept of economics, said the number one way you grow your economy is you have more people, more young people, more productive young people, educated young people, working young people. What happens when you have more and more older people like me, not you yet, forget that, and fewer and fewer young people? The perfect example is that when Social Security started, I think, in 1911, there were 11 workers for every person on Social Security. There are now 3, and by 2040, there'll be 2 Americans working for everyone on Social Security. And Social Security is not a pension program, it's a pay-as-you-go program. So what I spend, what I contribute to the government in Social Security, goes to pay people who are retired. What happens when you have fewer and fewer people contributing? And that's why this is a big issue. The only silver lining is AI. AI is going to eliminate a lot of the jobs that these kids that we're going to be having anyway. And so it's less of a problem, but it creates another problem. What happens? The head of AI for Microsoft says that between now and the middle of next year, agentic AI agents, AI bots will be able to do 95% of every single white-collar job, period. And we're seeing in the news on a weekly basis, large companies laying off hundreds, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people because they can, quite frankly, do it better with AI. And a perfect example, there's a company in the United States, they do call center work, and they use AI bots, AI agents to do it. They have Airbnb and a couple other major companies who are their clients. They handle hundreds of thousands of calls a day, and the company has a total of 8 employees. And these are done by AI agents. And they said since they switched to AI agents, the customer satisfaction is higher with the agents than it was with human beings. And there's a French company that does the same thing. They laid off 1,300 people doing call center work, replacing with AI agents. And again, higher customer satisfaction. So it's sad to see a population shrink, but maybe AI means it's not a bad thing. But the problem is if AI is taking jobs at a faster rate than the population is shrinking, so we're going to run into a really difficult period of time when there are going to be people who don't have jobs, they don't have income, and we're going to have to decide what to do to help them make this transition. By the end of this century, and maybe by 2050, this problem will have self-resolved itself, but it's difficult.
For sure. And a strong housing market and construction market always helps us here in the rail industry. How are those markets looking today?
If you have fewer people, you need fewer homes. It's that simple. And if you have fewer people being born, you have more older people. And obviously, services for seniors make a lot of sense. My wife has been in China for the past 6 months dealing with her mother's illnesses, and we just had a conversation before this fall about the explosion of assisted living and nursing homes in China to deal with the fact that their aging population is going up. The old Chinese culture was that when your parents got old, they stayed with the kids, and kids, this generation kids are saying, hell no, we're putting you in this facility. And it's a big challenge. So there will be a lot of building for older people, but new house construction, in my opinion, will slow down because there simply won't be as many people doing it. And then there's the issue of affordability. There are a lot of people who would love to buy a house, they simply can't afford it. And there are not many cities that do more than give lip service to affordability. They still have rules and regulations that make it just very expensive to have houses that are affordable to people.
Well, and based on power is now switching, the base load power, I should say, is now being switched back and shifted back more toward fossil fuels we're seeing the last couple of years, like coal and LNG. Are you seeing those markets as being strong?
You know, the challenge with power was most of the people who were arguing for green power did not understand how electricity is generated. They didn't understand that electricity is you produce it, you use it, or you lose it. And what's really important is consistency. And so I'm a big fan of green energy. I think if it's free, why not take advantage of it? But there's something called intermittency, where when you have solar and the cloud goes over the solar panels, well, guess what? Less electricity is produced. Well, if you're running a data center or you're doing surgery, you don't want the electricity to go down. So you have to have something to make up for that. And I did some work with a colleague of mine for a major oil company 10 years ago. And what we found was that as when you add more renewables to the grid, you need more natural gas backup to deal with intermittency. The same thing with wind. Wind doesn't blow all the time. If you have maximized the wind capacity of your wind turbines, it's blowing 40% of the time. What do you do with the other 60% of the time? Eventually, that problem gets solved with battery storage, and we're seeing more investment in battery storage than we've ever seen before as the cost goes down. But the amount of battery storage, just think about how much battery storage you need to be able to power the entire needs of the city of Houston for a month. As we like to say in Texas, that dog don't hunt right now. It's not going to hunt anytime soon. So that's why fossil fuels are absolutely crucial. The other thing that's really interesting is people don't realize when you look at a barrel of oil, half of it goes to energy and transportation, half of it goes to making a whole bunch of other stuff that is kind of important, like plastics. And I could go down the list, but then you say I work for the plastic industry. But people don't understand that. What's really been interesting to me, as somebody who's been concerned about the environment and teaches support and sustainability, is how the protests against fossil fuels stopped when Russia invaded Ukraine almost 5 years. And how any of those who didn't get the message with the Ukrainian war got the message when the Straits of Hormuz closed. And there was one fifth of, the Philippines have less than a month worth of oil and gas before they go black entirely. Japan. There are these fantasies about the role of oil and gas and fossil fuels. And the final thing is, let's look at China. In the year 2000, the United States produced twice the greenhouse gases of China. By 2008, China equaled us. Today, China produces a third more greenhouse gas than the United States, the EU, Japan, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea combined. They are building more gas-fired power plants than the rest of the world combined, new ones to bring online. And 55% of their energy comes from coal. 70% of the energy of India comes from coal. Those two countries represent 2.8 billion people. We can't, but if we went carbon zero, it wouldn't make a difference on the environment because of what China and India and other countries are doing. So the key to our success in terms of making sure that the climate is minimally impacted by our lifestyle is innovation. And there are a lot of really interesting innovations that are coming online that will reduce the amount of carbon we produce to generate electricity. But the idea that we can go to carbon zero or no fossil fuel by 2030 or 2040 or 2050, most people, hopefully now, if they have brains, realize that's a fantasy. It's not going to happen.
What are some other markets that people should keep an eye on? What are some strong markets out there?
Well, I was asked at the conference if I was going to be a betting man, what would I bet on? I said electricity. There are over 1 billion people on this planet that have zero access to electricity. No, I think about 1.5 billion. 24/7, zero access to electricity. And they'd like to have electricity. And about 1 billion people have zero access to potable water. So a long time ago, when I started the economic development company, I learned something very interesting, that the preconditions for growing your economy are clean, reliable, and affordable electric power, and for clean, reliable, and affordable water. Those are the preconditions. If you don't have them, you can grow a little, but you can't grow a lot. Okay, so you can think about that. So you think about going to a school and you don't have electricity. I remember working on a World Bank project in Tanzania with a large government entity that was responsible for it. They had a monopoly on tobacco. So they were money. They were tobacco tax for 20% of the country's government's revenue at that time. And we were working in the office late one day, and the executive secretary to the general manager said she wanted to catch her bus, but she wasn't sure if the bus was still running. So we said, we'll take you back. And when we took this woman, who was brilliant, very competent, to her home was powered by papers. She didn't have electricity. And she was the executive assistant to the general manager of a company that was responsible for 20% of the government's revenue. And she didn't have electricity. So we take a lot of things for granted, but for electricity, I'd start with electricity, because even if you have fewer people, and then I think I shared with the group last week that there are 35 electric generation projects using natural gas being built in the Permian Basin to serve data centers, which are at the heart of AI. And when those are finished, they'll be producing 40 gigawatts worth of electricity, primarily for data centers. Put that in context, it's like 40 nuclear power plants. So electricity, and then there's storage. So if you focus on those two things, I can't see how you can move. After that, I'll be quiet.
Well, believe it or not, we're nearing the end of our episode together already. So what do you want people to take away from our episode today? What good news is there for them in the economy this year?
I think in the past, there are a lot of people, especially young people, who were just taking things for granted. And everything was on cruise control. From the second invasion of Ukraine to now the war in Iran, our cruise control is broken. Nobody's taking anything for granted. I think there's much greater awareness, whether you're on the right or the left or in the center. There's much greater awareness of what the government can and cannot do, and what the government does and does not do. And something as simple as the lines. It's at the airports. That's nonpartisan. Even had Bill Barr, the former U.S. Attorney General, standing in line in Houston for 2.5 hours because he wasn't flying private. That's impacting every single person in this country, because either you're in line, or you have friends who are in line, or your relatives are in line, or you're thinking about taking a trip, and you're saying, do I really want to have to get to the airport 4 hours early for a 1 hour flight? Let's do that. So I think there's a much greater awareness of we cannot trust them to do a good job for us. We have to be actively involved. And I think we're going to see that in the midterm elections. The turnout was higher than we've seen in a long time. I think we're going to see it in the presidential election in 28. And I think that's a really good thing. It's when you have a motivated, aware, concerned, voting populace, good things can happen. So that's what, it's the silver lining of all this crap that's going on. So I'm kind of excited about that.
And what are you going to do with all this free time you got coming up next year?
My wife has a list. She's a very good planner. we have an Airstream and I have a Ram truck, and I just tell her, put in the GPS, point me in the right direction, I'll drive there. So we both play golf. Unfortunately, she's become a much better golfer than me, and her handicap is 8. And she
Wow.
plays with the same tees that I play for, which is disgusting, so people laugh at me. But we'll play a lot of golf. We'll do a lot of traveling. And have you ever been to the shores of Lake Michigan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we went there for the first time last summer and fell in love because we were having this debate about spending a lot of time at the seashore. And I grew up in Los Angeles. I did a lot of work in the Caribbean. And the ocean really looks nice, but all that salt screws everything up. I don't like the salt. Well, I like the sound of the waves. I like the sand. And we're going back and forth. Then we go to Lake Michigan. It's like, oh, it looks like the ocean. It has waves. They're not big. It has sand, but it's all freshwater. I think we have a couple on. So no, we love exploring. She's an incredibly brilliant person. People don't know why she's been married to me for 25 years, but that's okay. She's also tough. That's why. But she's also very insightful, and we love exploring. So we're going to do a lot of exploring. We'll do that for a while, and then we'll probably settle down for something.
Sounds good to me. And I grew up in Chicago, so I'm a big fan of Lake Michigan. Oh, yeah.
Amazing. But I will tell you, Lake Michigan and Lake Superior right next to each other. Don't get them confused. We did a little swimming in Lake Michigan, and we said, "Oh, here's Lake Superior." And we jumped in. It's like 15 degrees colder. Like, yeah.
And the lake effect snow, if you're on the east side of the lake versus the west side of the lake, is a huge difference. So be aware of that.
Absolutely.
Well, what else would you like to share with our audience before we go today?
On one level, this is just a crazy time. And, AI, we got the war, we got all of us getting older. But on the other hand, average middle class Americans have a better quality of life than the richest Americans have in the future. The things you take for granted are just amazing. Level of healthcare. There are people dying of stuff who are wealthy that are non-issues for us. There are a lot of wealthy people who have just got electricity, but they have bare wires in their house, and the worry was that their house would burn down. The automobile industry was just getting its feet under itself, and a lot of the roads were unpaved. Cities were inventing stoplights because traffic was a horrible thing, and people's lifespans were really short. So we may look back as humans and say this was the greatest time to be a human, in part because of what AI could do, and in part because of what we're able to do. I tell my students we're the last generation of humans who can honestly say we're the most intelligent beings on the planet. As of last year, AI agents had an IQ of 150, which is equivalent to genius level. So the AI agents were brighter than 99% of us, 99.9% of us. Sometime in 2026, they will pass it, and AI agents will be the most intelligent beings on the planet. Whether they're beings or not, it's only a question of time. So this may be the peak time for humans, and so I think we should really enjoy it. So how about that for good bad news?
Well, I've always enjoyed having you on the podcast, my friend. So thank you for coming back for a second time. Would you like to come back for a third time? I know you'll probably be semi-retired by then, but we can get you in the Airstream on Lake Michigan.
Yeah, I'd be fine to come back. I actually did a course once during the pandemic for the Airstream.
Nice.
Really difficult in terms of just the logistics of it, but it worked. So yeah, I love what you do, and it's really important. And this is, again, think about this. This would not have been possible 10 years ago, and it's really important. And I listen to the list of countries that you're in and countries that you're popular in, and it just, when I was coming up, that was science fiction. That was Buck Rogers. That was Flintstones. That was not possible. And now we just take this stuff for granted. And, a perfect example, my wife's been in China. We use Verizon. We have a new plan on Verizon that says I can call my wife in China for no additional cost. So we talk twice a day for sometimes up to an hour and a half at no additional cost. My bill is the same. And it's like, how can that be? And I don't care. It is. It's wonderful. So this is a blessed time, and we're going to look back at this time and say, God, remember how good things were back in 2026? So it's kind of cool. It's good seeing you again, Don.
Good seeing you too. Always a pleasure. And I will come visit you. I promise I'll schedule something with you so you know I'm coming and visit.
Just let me know so I can make sure I'm in town.
I will.
And I'll invite you to class. You can see what I do for a little bit.
Perfect. That sounds wonderful. Thank you as always, my friend. You have a wonderful rest of the year and enjoy when I'm sure we'll talk again before this, but we'll have you on the podcast again when you're semi-retired and enjoying life and playing golf.
All right. I'm looking forward to enjoying life and playing golf. I'm glad you separated the two.
I didn't want to say because she's better than you, but
golf is the most amazing thing because you can never do it perfectly. It's frustrating, but it just gives you a great sense of satisfaction knowing that, yeah, I hit that ball in the water. Nobody else did.
That's right. You showed who's boss.
Take care, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And now we're going to jump into my 2 cents. So the rail industry continues to be a major contributor to the U.S. economy and always will be. Short term, there's certainly been some things we didn't anticipate happening in Q1. I think we can all agree on that. But I feel that our industry remains steady and that things will remain fairly status quo for the next year. Long term, the tax cuts and tax incentives are expected to put a significant amount of cash back into the marketplace. And combined with the deregulation, could mean significant business growth over the next 2 to 3 years, which should be a positive ripple effect for our entire industry and our entire economy. That's my hope. And that's my 2 cents. So again, I'd like to recognize our anchor sponsor of the Revolution Rail Group. So we're a brokering and consulting firm in the railcar industry. So if you need any kind of merger and acquisition consulting, process flow analysis, market analysis, we can help you with that. We can also help you with brokering, buying, selling, leasing, and subleasing of rail cars. You can reach out to us today at 844-455-3434 or info@therevolutionrailgroup.com. You can also check out our full suite of services on our website at therevolutionrailgroup.com. Our next episode is coming soon. Hard to believe we're nearing halfway through season 4 already. This year is just flying by. We're going to be talking soon about the Boots for Troops on our Heroes Award for the 4th year. So stay tuned for that in the upcoming episodes. And if you're in the Houston area and you want to check out crawfish, if you're a big fan of crawfish, we have the Crawfish Festival coming up for Moffett Services' 12th Annual Crawfish Festival, sponsoring Boots for Troops. So it's benefiting Boots for Troops. That's coming up at the Sam Houston Raceway Park, April 18th. It's all you can eat crawfish and open bar for 1 ticket. So go ahead and check that out. It's the 12th Annual Moffett Services Crawfish Festival. And Easton Corbin is going to be playing. I believe a Josh Abbott band is going to be playing. Check us out. Come visit. I'll be running the welcome team, so you can come hang out with me. I will welcome you with open arms along with our team. And it's all for a fundraiser. So it's all for benefit. So look forward to seeing you all there. God bless. Make it a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the American Railroading Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover on a future episode or want to support or sponsor the show, please visit our website at AmericanRailroading.net. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on the American Railroading Podcast.